I pressed my sleeve down harder, but Jace's fingers were already prying it upward with cruel determination. "Come on, Chase. Show us that freaky ink again." His voice dripped with mockery and the cafeteria erupted in laughter around us. My heart pounded violently against my ribs as 3 more pack members circled me like predators, their eyes gleaming with that familiar sadistic pleasure I'd come to dread. The tattoo on my inner wrist, a strange ancient symbol that resembled 3 interlocking crescents surrounded by intricate runic lines, had been there since birth, and I'd learned to hate it just as much as they did. "Looks like someone scribbled on you with a broken pen," Mira taunted, holding up her phone to record the humiliation. I jerked my arm back, but the damage was done. The entire academy had seen it by now, posted and reposted with captions like "Omega Freak" with the reject mark. Nobody knew what it meant. My parents didn't know. Even the pack elders had gone silent when I'd shown them years ago, their faces draining of color before they'd hurried me out of their chambers without explanation. All I understood was that this mark made me different in the worst possible way. And in a world where Omegas already occupied the lowest rung of society, being different meant becoming everyone's favorite target. I grabbed my tray and bolted before Jace could snatch me again. The hallway blurred as I ran, my breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Their laughter still echoed behind me, pursuing me like ghosts I could never outrun. The weight of their stares felt like claws scraping down my spine, leaving invisible wounds that never quite healed. When I finally stopped, I found myself outside near the old oak tree where nobody ever ventured. I slumped against the rough trunk and let the tears fall freely, hot and bitter. "Why me?" I whispered to the empty air. "What did I do to deserve this existence?" That's when I felt it, a sudden pulse emanating from the tattoo, warm and electric, as if something dormant had suddenly awakened after years of slumber. I stared down at my wrist in shock, watching the lines begin to glow with a faint silver light that made my skin tingle with an unfamiliar energy. And then I smelled them. 3 distinct scents, powerful and overwhelming, cutting through the air like lightning before a thunderstorm. Cedarwood and night rain, smoke and wild honey, steel and winter frost. My Omega instinct screamed warnings at me to flee, to hide, because these weren't ordinary alphas approaching. These were alphas who could command the earth itself to bow. I looked up and froze completely. 3 figures stood at the clearing's edge, tall and impossibly commanding, their eyes locked onto me, or more specifically onto my wrist where the mark now glowed brighter than ever. The one in the middle, with dark hair that caught the fading sunlight and eyes like molten gold, took a measured step forward. His voice was low and reverent, trembling with something I couldn't identify, the lost mark. And then, to my absolute shock and confusion, all 3 of them dropped to one knee before me, heads bowed as if I were royalty they'd been searching for across centuries. My breath caught in my throat. Nothing in my miserable life had prepared me for this moment. These alphas radiated power that made the air itself feel heavier, denser, charged with an energy that made my knees weak. Yet here they were, kneeling in the dirt for me, a worthless Omega who couldn't even defend himself from academy bullies. The golden-eyed one slowly raised his head, and when our gazes met, I felt something shift deep in my chest, like puzzle pieces clicking into place after a lifetime of being scattered. "We've been searching for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't understand, for so many years, the way he looked at me, like I was oxygen and he'd been suffocating, made me want to simultaneously run away and move closer. I pressed myself harder against the tree trunk, my mind spinning with questions that tangled together into incomprehensible chaos. Who were these alphas? Why were they kneeling? What did they want from me? And why did my mark suddenly feel alive against my skin, pulsing in rhythm with my racing heartbeat? The second alpha, with silver-streaked hair that gleamed like moonlight and eyes the color of winter ice, finally spoke. "You don't know what you are, do you?" It wasn't really a question. His voice carried an edge of sadness that seemed inappropriate for someone so powerful. I shook my head mutely, still unable to form coherent words. The third one, with bronze skin that seemed to glow in the dying light and amber eyes that held surprising warmth, took a small step closer. "That mark isn't a curse, Chase. It's a seal. The sovereign seal." "I don't understand," I finally managed to whisper, my voice cracking. "I don't understand any of this." My whole body trembled now, overwhelmed by their presence and the impossibility of this situation. The golden-eyed alpha slowly rose to his feet, his movements careful and deliberate as if afraid of startling me further. "My name is Killian," he said gently. "These are my brothers Nash and Grady. We're the triplet alpha kings of the Northern Territories." His words should have sounded arrogant, but instead they carried only truth and something that sounded almost like, "Kings don't kneel," I said stupidly, because my brain couldn't process anything more complex. Grady smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. "Kings kneel for their destined Omega." Destined. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard stories about destined mates, of course. Everyone had, but those were fairy tales told to children, not reality. Certainly not my reality. "You're wrong," I said, shaking my head violently. "I'm nobody. Just a weak Omega who can't even pass combat training." Before any of them could respond, a massive explosion rocked the academy behind us. The sound was deafening, and I watched in horror as flames erupted into the darkening sky, black smoke billowing like serpents' tongues. Screams pierced the air, and my heart stopped. Jace, Mara, all the students who'd tormented me, yes, but also innocent people who'd done nothing wrong. "No," I breathed, starting to move toward the burning building. Killian's hand closed around my wrist. "Not the one with the mark," I noticed distantly, stopping me. "We need to leave. Now." His voice had changed, become harder, more commanding. Nash was already moving, barking orders into a phone that had appeared in his hand. Grady stepped closer to me, his amber eyes urgent. "If you stay here, you'll die. They're here for you, Chase. Please. Trust us." I looked back at the academy one final time, watching my entire world burn. Then I looked at these three impossible alphas who claimed I was destined for them, who'd knelt before me like I mattered. My mock pulsed again, insistent, as if urging me to choose. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's go." And we ran into the gathering darkness, leaving everything I'd ever known behind in the flames. We ran through the forest for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. My lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest. But every time I stumbled, one of them was there, steadying me, supporting me, keeping me moving. Behind us, the sounds of chaos gradually faded, replaced by the quiet rustle of leaves and our labored breathing. Finally, Killian raised his hand, and we stopped in a small clearing where moonlight filtered through the canopy above. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. My mind raced with fragmented thoughts that refused to form coherent patterns. The academy was destroyed. People might be dead, and I was running through the woods with three alpha kings who claimed I was their destined mate because of a tattoo everyone had spent my entire life mocking. "This is insane," I gasped out between breaths. "This is completely insane." "I know it seems that way," Nash said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could snap steel bars with his bare hands. "But everything we've told you is true. That mark on your wrist is the sovereign seal, created centuries ago by the moon goddess herself. It appears only once every 1,000 years, on an Omega chosen to unite the warring alpha bloodlines." He paused, studying my face. "It chose you, Chase." I straightened up slowly, wrapping my arms around myself defensively. "But why? I'm the weakest Omega at the academy. I can barely shift into my wolf form. I have no special abilities, no power, nothing that makes me remotely qualified to unite anything." The words poured out of me, all the insecurities I'd buried deep rising to the surface. "You've made a mistake. The mark must be broken or defective or something." Grady moved closer, and I caught his scent again, smoke and wild honey, intoxicating and terrifying. "The mark doesn't make mistakes. You were chosen because of who you are, not despite it. Your spirit is pure, uncorrupted by the violence and hatred that's plagued our world for generations." His amber eyes held mine with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "That's exactly what we need." "What you need?" I repeated bitterly. "What about what I need? What about my life? My choices?" I gestured wildly back toward where the academy burned. "I just lost everything. My home, my belongings, probably people I knew. And you're talking about prophecies and destinies like I'm supposed to just accept this. Killian stepped forward and I noticed how careful he was to keep some distance between us, respecting my obvious distress. You're right. This isn't fair to you. None of this is. We should have van you sooner, should have protected you better. Something flickered across his face, regret mixed with self-recrimination. We've been searching for years, following any hint of the seal's awakening. When we finally sensed it today, we came immediately. But we were too late to prevent the attack. Attack? The word felt foreign on my tongue. You mean that explosion wasn't an accident? Nash shook his head grimly. Usher's forces have been hunting for the sovereign Omega just as we have. But for very different reasons. While we want to fulfill the prophecy and bring peace, he wants to corrupt the seal's power, use it to dominate all the packs under his control. My blood ran cold. Someone wants to use me as a weapon? The reality of my situation crashed down like an avalanche. This wasn't just about destiny or mates or prophecies. This was about survival. People were actively trying to kill or capture me for power I didn't even know I possessed. I don't want any of this, I said quietly. And I was embarrassed to hear my voice break. I just wanted to be normal. Normal is overrated, Grady said softly. And when I looked at him sharply, I saw understanding in his eyes rather than pity. I know what it's like to feel different. To not fit the mold everyone expects. Being the youngest triplet, I was always considered too soft, too emotional for an alpha king. But that so-called weakness? It's actually my greatest strength. He offered me a small smile. Your differences aren't flaws, Chase. They're what make you perfect for this role. I wanted to argue, to reject everything they were saying, but exhaustion was settling into my bones. The adrenaline that had kept me running was fading, leaving only bone-deep weariness and confusion. Where are we going? I asked instead, choosing the practical question over the existential ones swirling in my head. Our palace, Killian answered. It's protected by ancient magic and modern security. You'll be safe there while we figure out our next move. He hesitated, then added, we won't force you to accept the bond or the prophecy. Whatever you decide, we'll respect it. But please, at least let us keep you safe from Usher. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. I'd expected dominance, commands, the typical alpha arrogance. Instead, they were asking permission, giving me choices even though everything about this situation suggested I had none. Okay, I said finally, because what other option did I have? I couldn't go back to the academy. I had nowhere else to turn. And despite my fear and confusion, something deep inside me, maybe the mark, maybe instinct, whispered that these alphas wouldn't hurt me. We started moving again, this time at a slower pace. Nash produced a jacket from somewhere and draped it over my shoulders when he noticed me shivering. It smelled like steel and winter frost, and I hated how comforting I found it. Grady walked beside me, occasionally pointing out roots or rocks I might trip over in the darkness. And Killian led the way, constantly scanning our surroundings for threats. Can I ask something? I ventured after several minutes of silence. Why triplets? The prophecy mentions 3 bloodlines. But why did it have to be brothers? Nash answered without turning around. The 3 bloodlines, Black Moon, Silver Fang, and Crimson Dawn, have been enemies for centuries. Normally they would never unite. But we're special. Our mother was Black Moon, our father was Silver Fang, and we were blessed by the Crimson Dawn elders at birth. We carry all 3 bloodlines in our veins, which makes us the only alphas capable of fulfilling the prophecy with the sovereign Omega. So you've been waiting your whole lives for me? The thought was overwhelming. Pretty much, Grady confirmed. We're 26 now. We've known about the prophecy since we were teenagers. Every decision we've made has been leading to this moment. Finding you, protecting you. 26. They were only 7 years older than me, yet they'd spent over a decade preparing for my existence. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on me. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough? Killian stopped and turned to face me fully. Then we'll become strong enough for both of us. This isn't just your burden, Chase. We're in this together now. Together. The word echoed in my mind as we continued walking. For someone who'd been alone his entire life, the concept felt foreign and terrifying and impossibly appealing all at once. We emerged from the forest just as dawn began painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Before us stood a structure that stole what little breath I had left. A massive palace that seemed to grow directly from the mountainside. All dark stone and soaring towers that pierced the morning mist. Ancient symbols were carved into every surface, glowing faintly with the same silver light as my mark. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Welcome home," Killian said quietly, and something in his tone made me wonder if he was talking to me or to himself. We crossed a bridge that spanned a deep ravine, my legs trembling from exhaustion and nerves. Guards stationed at intervals bowed deeply as we passed, their eyes widening when they caught sight of me. I heard whispers following in our wake. "The Omega, the seal, the prophecy is real." Nash led us through an enormous arched doorway, made of solid oak reinforced with iron and etched with protective runes. The entrance hall beyond was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings that seemed to touch the sky, massive tapestries depicting ancient battles and ceremonies, and a floor made of polished marble that reflected everything like dark water. I felt incredibly small and out of place in my dirty academy uniform and borrowed jacket. "You must be starving," Grady observed, and I realized with a start that I hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch. My stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, and I felt heat creep up my neck. He smiled warmly. "Come on, let's get you fed first. Everything else can wait." We moved deeper into the palace, through corridors lined with portraits of stern-looking alphas and elegant omegas. Servants scurried past, their curious glances quickly averted when one of the brothers looked their way. The dining hall was smaller than I expected, clearly designed for private family meals rather than state functions. A long table dominated the space, and within minutes, servants appeared with platters of food, fresh bread, eggs, bacon, fruits I'd never seen before, and pastries that smelled like heaven. I sat hesitantly, unsure of the protocol, until Nash gestured for me to help myself. I ate ravenously, too hungry to care about manners. The brothers watched me with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. Satisfaction mixed with something softer, more tender. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Killian asked carefully. I paused mid-bite, thinking. The academy food wasn't great, but I guess yesterday's breakfast was the last time I ate anything substantial. "Yesterday," Nash repeated, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They starved you." I shook my head quickly. "No, I usually skipped lunch. It was easier than dealing with the cafeteria." The admission hung in the air, revealing more about my academy life than I'd intended. Grady's hands clenched into fists on the table, but when he spoke, his voice remained gentle. "That won't happen here. You'll never have to skip meals or hide from anyone again." After I'd eaten my fill, Killian pushed back from the table. "I imagine you have questions. We promised you answers, and we'll give them to you. But first, let me show you something." He led us out of the dining hall and down a spiral staircase that descended into the palace's lower levels. The air grew cooler, and I noticed the ancient symbols on the walls glowing brighter as we went deeper. We stopped before a heavy door marked with a seal identical to my tattoo. Killian pressed his palm against it, and the door swung open silently. Inside was a library unlike anything I'd ever imagined. Shelves upon shelves of old books and scrolls. Strange artifacts displayed in glass cases, and in the center of the room, a large table covered with maps and documents. "This is the Prophecy Archive," Nash explained. "Everything we know about the Sovereign Seal and the prophecy is contained here." Grady carefully unrolled an ancient scroll on the table, its edges brown and brittle with age. The text was written in a language I didn't recognize, but accompanying illustrations told a story. An omega with a marked wrist standing between three alphas, light radiating from them to encompass warring wolf packs. The prophecy states that when the sovereign omega bonds with the three blood alphas, their combined power will end the cycle of violence that has plagued our kind for millennia. Nash translated. "But there's a catch, isn't there?" I heard myself ask. There's always a catch in these stories. The three brothers exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Killian spoke. "The prophecy mentions a transformation. The Omega who completes the bond will transcend ordinary mortality, becoming something more. A conduit for ancient power." "Define more," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Grady pulled out another scroll, this one covered in detailed annotations. "The accounts vary, but they all mention the same things. enhanced abilities, extended lifespan, a connection to the elemental forces that govern our world. You would become incredibly powerful, Chase. Powerful enough to enforce peace across all territories. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. And the downside? Nash's ice blue eyes met mine with uncomfortable honesty. The transformation isn't without cost. According to some texts, the Omega's personality might change, become more distant, less connected to individual emotions and more focused on the greater good. There are also mentions of memory loss, though it's unclear whether that's temporary or permanent. My blood turned to ice in my veins. You're saying if I go through with this bond, I might lose myself? Forget who I am? The panic that had been simmering since we arrived suddenly boiled Daber. You brought me here, made me think I was safe, but you're asking me to commit suicide, just a different kind. I backed away from the table, from them, my heart racing. Chase, wait, Killian started, but I cut him off. No, you don't get to decide this for me. I won't become some emotionless weapon for your war, no matter how noble the cause. Grady moved toward me slowly, hands raised in a placating gesture. We're not asking you to decide anything right now. We told you about the cost because you deserve complete honesty. We've been searching for alternatives, ways to fulfill the prophecy without the transformation. Have you found any? I demanded. The silence that greeted my question was answer enough. We're still looking, Nash said firmly. We won't stop until we find a way to keep you safe and whole. You're not just a prophecy to us, Chase. He stopped abruptly, seeming to struggle for words. We're what? I pressed, something in his tone catching my attention. Killian finished the thought. You're important. Beyond the mark. Beyond destiny. In the short time we've known you, you've already become someone we care about protecting. The raw honesty in his voice stole my breath. These powerful alpha kings, who could have anyone they wanted, seemed genuinely invested in my well-being. I sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by everything I'd learned. I need time to process all of this. Grady nodded immediately. Of course. We'll show you to your room. You can rest, think, and when you're ready, we'll talk more. As we left the archive, I couldn't help glancing back at those ancient scrolls. Somewhere in all that accumulated knowledge was my fate, written centuries before I was born. The question was whether I had the courage to face it. The next few days blurred together in a haze of training and discovery. Each morning began before dawn, with Nash teaching me how to channel the strange energy that pulsed through my veins whenever the mark glowed. He was patient in a way that surprised me, never showing frustration when I accidentally shattered training equipment or caused small explosions of light that left scorch marks on the stone floors. Your power responds to emotion, he explained one afternoon, after I'd inadvertently sent a training dummy flying across the courtyard. Fear makes it volatile. Anger makes it destructive. But calm focus, that's where true strength lies. His ice blue eyes studied me intently. You need to find your center, Chase. A place inside yourself that remains steady no matter what chaos surrounds you. Finding that center proved harder than any physical training. My entire life had been chaos, rejection, loneliness, survival. Asking me to find peace within that storm felt impossible. Yet slowly, under Nash's methodical guidance, I began to understand the power wasn't separate from me, it was an extension of who I was. Accepting it meant accepting myself. Mark and all. Afternoons belonged to Grady, who insisted on combat training despite my protests about being hopeless at fighting. You're not hopeless, he said firmly the first day, handing me a practice sword. You're untrained. There's a difference. Unlike the brutal instructors at the academy who'd mocked my weakness, Grady approached teaching like an art form. He showed me how to use my smaller size as an advantage, how to read an opponent's body language, how to turn their strength against them. Fighting isn't about being the strongest, he told me during one session, easily deflecting my clumsy strike. It's about being the smartest. You've survived years of bullying by reading people, predicting their moves. That's already half the battle. His amber eyes held genuine respect. Now we just need to teach your body what your mind already knows. The physical contact during training sessions awakened something I wasn't prepared for. Every time Grady corrected my stance with gentle hands, every time Nash's fingers brushed mine while adjusting my energy flow, I felt the bond between us pulse stronger. It was no longer just a magical connection, it was becoming real, tangible, terrifyingly intimate. Evenings were reserved for Killian, who taught me strategy in the war room surrounded by maps and tactical documents. Power without wisdom is dangerous, he said, pointing to historical battles where brute force had failed against clever planning. You need to think 3 steps ahead, anticipate consequences, understand the bigger picture. His lessons went beyond warfare. He was teaching me how to be a leader, something I'd never imagined myself capable of becoming. But it was the quiet moments between training that truly shifted everything. Dinners where we shared meals and stories, slowly learning about each other beyond the prophecy. Late nights in the library where Grady would read aloud from ancient texts while I dozed against his shoulder. Early mornings when Nash would bring me tea without being asked, somehow knowing exactly how I liked it. Small gestures from Killian, a hand on my back when I was tired, a proud smile when I mastered a new technique. One evening I found myself alone in my room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The scared boy from the academy was fading, replaced by someone I barely recognized. My eyes held less fear now, more determination. The mark on my wrist no longer felt like a curse, but like a promise of something greater. I was changing, growing into whatever I was meant to become. A knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting a servant. Instead, Killian entered carrying an old leather-bound book, its cover worn smooth by centuries of handling. "I thought you should see this," he said, settling onto the bed beside me with careful distance, always conscious of my boundaries. "It's the original prophecy text, not the simplified version, but everything our ancestors recorded." My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The pages were filled with elaborate drawings and symbols that seemed to shift in the candlelight. I turned pages carefully until stopping at a particular illustration, 3 alphas surrounding an omega, their hands joined, light radiating from their combined forms. "What happens during the bonding ritual?" I asked quietly. Killian's expression grew serious. "When the sovereign omega completes the bond with their destined alphas, their powers merge. They become something unprecedented, strong enough to enforce peace across all territories, to end conflicts with just their presence." He paused, clearly wrestling with whether to continue. "But there are complications we haven't fully discussed." My stomach tightened. "What kind of complications?" He turned to another page, this one covered in dense text and warning symbols. "The transformation grants incredible power, but the price is steep. You would transcend normal mortality, become essentially immortal. Your abilities would expand beyond anything currently known. But in exchange," he stopped, jaw clenching. "In exchange?" I prompted, needing to hear it despite the dread building in my chest. "Parts of who you are might fade over time. Memories could become distant, like dreams you can barely recall. Emotions might dull, making it harder to connect with the very people you're trying to protect. You'd exist, powerful and eternal, but the essence of Chase, your personality, your dreams, your soul could gradually dissolve." The words hit like physical blows. I'd suspected there was a cost, but hearing it stated so plainly made it horrifyingly real. "You're telling me that bonding with you 3 means slowly losing myself, becoming an empty shell with power?" My voice came out rougher than intended, betrayal seeping through despite my attempts at composure. "We've been searching for alternatives," Killian said urgently, taking my hand in his. "Every elder we can find, every ancient text, every possible magical workaround. We won't ask you to sacrifice yourself for this prophecy, Chase. You're worth more than that." The raw emotion in his voice surprised me. This powerful Alpha King looking at me like I was precious, irreplaceable. Before I could respond, Nash and Grady appeared in the doorway, clearly sensing the heavy conversation through whatever connection we shared. Nash's expression was carefully controlled, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. Grady looked openly distressed, his usual warmth dimmed by worry. "You told him," Nash stated flatly. I looked at all 3 of them, really seeing them for the first time beyond their titles and power. They weren't just Alpha Kings bound to me by prophecy. They were people who cared, who worried, who were leveling with an impossible situation just as much as I was. "You love me," I said, the realization settling over me like dawn. "Breaking. All of you." Grady stepped forward, tears actually glistening in his amber eyes. "Yes. Maybe from the moment we found you, certainly from every moment since. The bond connected us. But what we feel goes far deeper than mag. His voice cracked slightly. You're not just our destined Omega, Chase. You're someone we admire, respect, want to protect and cherish. Someone we're falling for completely. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and vulnerable. Nobody in my entire life had ever loved me. My parents had abandoned me when the mark appeared. The academy had treated me like garbage. I'd existed in complete isolation. And now these three incredible alphas were offering me something I'd never dared hope for. I started, my own emotions threatening to overflow. Nash raised his hand gently. Don't say it yet. We don't want you feeling obligated or pressured by guilt. First, we find a say to the prophecy's cost. Then, when you're truly free to choose, we'll talk about feelings. The careful consideration in his words only made me feel more for them, but they were wrong if they thought I needed more time to know my heart. For the first time in 19 years, I felt something real, something terrifying and beautiful and completely genuine. I reached out, taking each of their hands in turn. Killian's strong and warm, Nash's cool and steady, Grady's gentle and reassuring. If we can't find another way, I'll do it anyway. Complete the bond, because you three have already become everything to me, and saving you, saving everyone is worth any price. The declaration settled over us like a vow, binding and absolute. Whatever came next, whatever sacrifices the prophecy demanded, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. I wasn't alone anymore, and that changed everything. I woke to sensation unlike anything I'd experienced before. My skin hypersensitive, every nerve ending alive with electricity and a deep aching need pulsing through my entire body. Initially confused, realization crashed over me. With horrifying clarity, my heat had started. Panic flooded my system as I understood what this meant. My first heat happening while living with three unmated alphas to whom I was already partially bonded. This was a disaster. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my flushed face, but nothing helped. My body was betraying me, growing more desperate with each passing minute for someone I wasn't ready to acknowledge. The bond made it exponentially worse. I could feel them in the palace, sense their presence like a magnetic pull that my biology screamed to answer. I wrapped myself in bed sheets, trying desperately to suppress my scent, knowing it was futile. A bonded Omega's heat scent was powerful enough to reach their destined alphas from miles away. Sure enough, within minutes, a soft knock sounded at my door. Chase? Grady's voice was strained, carefully controlled. You're sent, you've gone into heat. Shame burned through me, heating my face further. This was humiliating, being reduced to this needy, desperate state while they maintained perfect control. Don't come in, I called out, but my voice emerged breathy and wanting, making me hate myself more. I'm fine. Just leave me alone, please. You're not fine. Killian's voice came next, commanding yet pleading simultaneously. We can sense your distress through the bond. If you go through this alone without help, it could seriously harm you. Heat is already difficult for Omegas, but for someone bonded like you, the pain will be unbearable without your alphas nearby. The truth in his words made everything worse because I knew he was right. I was already barely holding myself together. I buried my face in my pillow, overwhelmed by frustration and need. I'd only known them for days, and yet my body craved them like I'd die without their touch. I don't want you seeing me like this, I whispered, tears building, weak and pathetic and completely out of control. The vulnerability of admitting that cost me more than I wanted to acknowledge. Nash spoke then, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Heat is natural, biological, nothing to be ashamed of. The bond intensifies everything, makes it harder to bear. Let us help you be comfortable. Nothing more, I swear. We won't take advantage of your state. The sincerity in his promise, the respect underlying it, broke something in my resistance. Slowly I unlocked the door. They entered carefully, and their eyes immediately found me, flushed, sweating, trembling in my nest of blankets. I watched their jaws clench, saw them physically fighting for control as their alpha instincts demanded they claim me. But they held themselves back, and that restraint meant more than any words could express. Grady moved first, sitting on the bed and offering me a thick, specially woven blanket. This fabric helps suppress scent, he explained gently. It should ease the intensity a bit. Killian appeared with ice-cold water, carefully helping me drink through a straw while Nash placed cool compresses on my forehead and neck. Their care was so tender, so respectful, that it emotionally shattered me. They could claim me right now, complete the bond while my body was begging for it. But instead they were simply taking care of me like I mattered beyond biology and prophecy. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You could have everything you want right now, and I wouldn't even resist." Killian's hand found mine, his thumb tracing soothing circles across my knuckles. "Because you're ours to cherish, not just claim, bond or no bond, prophecy or no prophecy. Your well-being matters more than our desires. Keeping you safe and comfortable isn't our responsibility, it's our privilege." The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty made tears finally spill over. I'd never felt wanted before, never felt like I mattered to anyone. And here were three powerful alpha kings treating me like I was precious, like my comfort was more important than their own needs. Grady pulled me into his arms, rocking me gently while Nash ran fingers through my hair and Killian held my hand against his chest where I could feel his heartbeat steady, grounding. The heat didn't disappear, but their presence made it bearable. The crushing pain eased to something manageable. The desperate need mellowed into warmth. They stayed with me through the worst of it, taking turns reading aloud, telling stories, just being there so I wasn't alone. Nobody had ever done anything like this for me before. "Thank you," I whispered hours later, when the peak had passed and I could think somewhat clearly again. For treating me like a person instead of just an omega in heat." Grady smiled, brushing damp hair from my forehead. "You'll always be a person to us first, Chase. Everything else comes second." As I drifted toward exhausted sleep, surrounded by their comforting presence and protective warmth, I realized something profound. I trusted them completely. These alphas who'd known me barely a week had earned something nobody else ever had. My absolute faith that they'd never hurt me, never use me, never see me as less than whole. The heat would return in waves over the next few days, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever happened, whatever the prophecy demanded, I knew I had people who genuinely cared about me, and that knowledge was worth everything. After my heat finally subsided, something fundamental had shifted between us. The bond felt stronger, more tangible, no longer just magical connection but genuine emotional intimacy. Yet the prophecy still loomed over everything like a dark cloud. And I was tired of half-truths and protected ignorance. One night, with the full moon casting silver light through the palace windows, I confronted them in the main hall with steel in my voice. "I need complete transparency. Every detail of the prophecy, every possible outcome, no more protective censorship. Now." Killian sighed deeply, clearly conflicted, before carefully unrolling an ancient scroll across the table. The parchment was centuries old, fragile and covered in elaborate script. "The prophecy promises that the sovereign Omega will unite the three bloodlines and bring eternal peace. But the cost is devastating." He paused, struggling with the words. "Whoever castes this bond will lose most of their humanity. They'll become a vessel for pure power, eternal, unstoppable, but essentially no longer themselves. You won't be Chase anymore. You'll be a living weapon." Despite expecting something terrible, hearing it stated so baldly made my blood run cold. "Explain exactly what happens to me." Nash stepped forward, his expression pained but honest. "Your memories will slowly fade. Small things initially, then larger pieces of your identity. Emotions will gradually dull until you feel almost nothing. You'll exist physically incredibly powerful and immortal. But your personality, your dreams, your essential self, everything that makes you you will dissolve over time." "How long do I have?" I asked, surprised by my own calmness. Grady closed his eyes as if the words physically hurt him. "Historical accounts vary. Some suggest months, others years. But eventually, inevitably, the transformation completes itself." My heart shattered again. So this was the ultimate reality. I could save them, save thousands of innocent lives, end the war entirely. But the price was my complete existence. Why hide this from me initially? Betrayal colored my words despite my attempt at composure. Killian stepped closer, raw guilt evident in his golden eyes. "Because we were cowards. We didn't want to drive you away immediately after finally finding you. We were selfish, wanting time with you, wanting to know you, wanting to. He swallowed hard, wanting to love you before reality destroyed everything. Love. The word pierced my chest like an arrow. If there's no alternative? I asked softly, already knowing the answer. If refusing the bond means war continues and thousands keep dying? Killian approached, cupping my face tenderly in his hands. Then we fight using every method we know. Without you. Because gaining peace by losing you isn't peace at all, Chase. You've become everything to us. We can't sacrifice you. But I could see the truth in their eyes. The war was already brutal beyond imagination. Daily reports came of destroyed villages, innocent casualties, refugees fleeing in terror, and I was the center of it all. Because of my existence. Because of this mark, people were suffering. I looked at each of them, Killian's fierce protectiveness hiding desperation, Nash's stoic facade crumbling, Grady's raw emotion he'd never tried to conceal. Suddenly a guard burst through the doors, his armor blood-stained and face ashen. "Sire! Urgent intelligence. Usher's army is advancing on the castle. Hundreds strong, possibly thousands. They possess dark magic and weapons we've never encountered. They're destroying everything in their path. Refugees are arriving from every direction." My stomach dropped violently. This was it. The final confrontation. And I faced an impossible choice. Accept the bond and potentially lose myself entirely. Or refuse and watch everyone die in brutal warfare. I looked at the three of them. Then at my wrist where the mark glowed almost constantly now, as if sensing my emotional turmoil. "I know what needs to happen," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite my breaking heart. I walked toward them, taking each hand firmly. "Bond with me. Right now. Complete the ritual." Killian shook his head desperately. "Chase, no. We need more time to search." "There is no more time," I interrupted, louder than intended. "People are dying every second we delay. And this is all happening because of me." "This isn't your fault," Nash said firmly. "But I knew better. If this is how I save everyone, then I'll do it. But promise me something." I looked into their eyes, barely holding back tears. "Even when I forget myself completely, even when I become just an empty vessel with power, promise you'll remember me. Remember us. These moments. These feelings. Everything we've shared. Promise me." When all three kissed me simultaneously, Killian's fierce and claiming, Nash's tender and heartbreaking, Grady's desperate and loving, my mark exploded in blinding light. Power surged through the room in visible waves as the bond finally completed itself. Magic flooded my veins, overwhelming and terrifying and beautiful all at once. Through the connection I felt everything they felt, their love, their fear, their memories, their absolute devotion, and the intensity nearly stopped my heart. The power built continuously, growing brighter and more intense. As I collapsed into their arms, the transformation beginning. I had one final coherent thought. "I love you. All three of you. Please never forget me." Then light consumed me entirely. My fate finally sealed. I knew that when I emerged from this, I probably wouldn't be the Chase who'd fallen completely for these three Alpha Kings. But in this last moment of clarity, I'd experienced something beautiful, being completely unconditionally loved. And perhaps that single perfect moment was worth any price. Even my own existence. The light grew impossibly bright, and I surrendered to whatever came next, knowing I'd made the only choice I could live with, even if I wouldn't remember making it.